Imagine being told that you absolutely must fiercely defend your fundamental human rights against anyone who tries to take them, like fight tooth and nail for them.
Right.
And then in the exact same breath, being told that if you ever actually feel pain because those rights were violated, well, that's entirely your own fault.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are super thrilled you're here with us. Today, we are exploring this striking, frankly mind-bending philosophical paradox presented in two essays. They were written in late 2022 by an author named Su Feng.
Yes.
And our mission today is just to figure out how these two, what seem like completely contradictory ideas, how they are actually meant to fit together.
I mean, it is really one of the most profound paradoxes you can encounter in modern philosophical writing. Because on one side, you have this uncompromising, incredibly rigid framework of human rights, and the text argues that we must actively fight for those. But then on the other side, there's this severe spiritual argument that our suffering, basically regardless of what the outside world actually does to us, is entirely self-inflicted.
Which is wild.
It is. And before we get into the weeds here, I think it's important to give you, the listener, a quick roadmap. These texts, they blend highly practical, very modern-day struggles with a demanding, almost stoic-like spiritual philosophy.
Yeah, and because these texts touch on some highly sensitive, very real-world issues. I mean, we're talking about everything from COVID-19 lockdown measures and property theft to profound personal betrayals. We really want to be crystal clear up front.
Absolutely.
We are here today just to impartially unpack and analyze the author's philosophical framework. Like, we are not taking sides here.
No, not at all.
And we are certainly not endorsing these viewpoints, right? We know these are politically and emotionally charged topics.
Yeah.
Our goal is strictly to explore the mechanics of how this author views human suffering, freedom, and consciousness. We're just relaying the ideas in the source material.
That's a crucial distinction to keep in mind because, honestly, the text makes some massive demands of the reader. The two essays we are looking at are titled The 8 Fundamental Rights Granted by the Greatest Creator to Humanity and Those in Pain Cannot Enter Heaven.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the first text, which really establishes the rules of the external world, right?
Right, the external rights.
So the author outlines 8 fundamental rights. And those were survival, create, migrate, speak, personal autonomy, thought, learn, and refuse.
Yeah, those 8.
But what immediately jumps out to me reading this list, it isn't just the rights themselves, but how the author actually defines them. Because they are completely stripped of legal jargon. Like, there is no talk of constitutions or Supreme Courts or any of that.
Yeah.
The author anchors these rights in naturalistic, almost biological terms.
Yeah, it's very raw.
It is. Take the right to create, for example. The text doesn't define this as like intellectual property or copyright law. It defines it as the inherent right to engage in physical labor, like to create on the very land that nurtures and supports you. It literally connects human dignity straight to the dirt under your feet.
What's fascinating here is how it just bypasses the state entirely. The text frames these rights as endowments from the greatest creator, which means they are innate to the condition of being alive.
Right.
You see this super vividly in how the author describes the right to speak. The argument is incredibly literal. Like, the creator gave human beings a mouth, and the biological function of that mouth isn't merely to chew food to survive.
Right. It has another purpose.
Exactly. Its secondary, equally vital function is to express wishes and communicate. So the author is arguing that silencing someone is essentially, well, it's a violation of human anatomy.
It's like cutting off an arm or something.
Basically, yeah.
And then there's the right to learn, which is framed with this wide, radically egalitarian lens. The text explicitly says you can learn whatever you want, whether that is high-minded philosophy, complex math, or just the practical, muddy skills of how to cultivate crops.
Yeah.
It places the farmer and the philosopher on the exact same footing of human dignity.
It levels the playing field completely.
But, and this is important, the text also carries a very severe warning. Like, when it discusses the right to thought, which is the innate ability to form ideas, it says that if someone is deprived of that ability, their life is, quote, no better than that of pigs, dogs, chickens, or ducks.
Wow, yeah, that language is intentionally harsh.
Very harsh.
The author's doing that to really illustrate the mechanism of dehumanization here. The text doesn't treat the lack of freedom as just, bad luck or some passive misfortune.
Right, it's not an accident.
No. If you cannot think freely or move freely or refuse things you do not want to do, The author explicitly states that someone has actively deprived you of those rights.
Hmm.
It is framed as a literal theft.
Theft, okay.
And because it's a theft, the text demands action. To live as a true human being, you just cannot be a passive victim. You have to strive to reclaim these rights.
So applying this to your daily life as a listener, think about this. If you are stuck in a profoundly restrictive environment or maybe a system that demands blind obedience without the right to thought or the right to refuse, the text argues you are fundamentally suffocating.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It treats these rights like oxygen. The underlying logic seems to be very causal, right? Like, without these rights, individuals suffer and society just descends into conflict. Reclaim them, and we achieve happiness, joy, and a peaceful society.
That is the external equation the first text sets up. You secure the perimeter, you secure your happiness. Like, if you fight for your right to speak, to move, and to refuse things you find unacceptable, you basically pave the way for a blessed life. The external environment dictates your internal peace.
Okay, but, and here is the huge but, if reclaiming those rights is the ultimate key to a peaceful society, how does Weifeng explain the fact that people with a vast amount of physical freedom still experience this profound, agonizing misery?
Right.
Because that is where we collide with the second essay, Those in Pain Cannot Enter Heaven. We just spent all this time establishing this entire worldview that we must fight external forces to avoid suffering. And then this second text completely flips the premise on its head.
It is a radical philosophical pivot. I mean, the first text tells you to fight the thief who steals your rights. The second text tells you that if you actually experience pain over being robbed, the problem actually lies within you.
Wait, what?
Yeah. The text argues that feeling pain is a clear indicator that a person has, quote, gone astray from the proper way of living.
And the examples the author uses to illustrate this pain are strikingly modern.
Yeah.
Like, we aren't just talking about the classic ancient spiritual tropes of, birth, aging, illness, and death.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah, exactly. The author specifically lists the pain of being unable to repay your car loan or your home mortgage.
Yeah.
The pain of failing to get rich or failing to become a high-ranking official. It even explicitly mentions, and this is crazy given when it was written, the pain of being confined at home, lacking food due to lockdown measures.
The inclusion of lockdown measures in mortgage debts is wild. It really anchors this ancient-sounding philosophy firmly in the anxieties of 2022. It forces the reader to apply these abstract spiritual concepts to, like, tomorrow morning's headlines.
Right. And I have to push back here because this is where the text gets incredibly controversial. Like, if I am physically trapped in a lockdown, unable to leave my house to get food, or if someone actually breaks into my home and robs me of my property, and both of those examples are explicitly mentioned in the text, how can the resulting pain possibly be my fault?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It feels entirely counterintuitive. It sounds dangerously close to, like, pushing someone into a puddle and then blaming them for getting wet.
Right, victim blaming.
Yeah. How does the author justify stripping the environment of the blame entirely?
It is a very natural reaction to resist this idea, seriously. But to understand the author's logic, we have to look at the mechanism of how Weifeng categorizes pain.
Okay.
The text divides human suffering into three distinct buckets. There's physical pain, which is purely bodily. Then there's mental pain, which encompasses all our emotions. And finally, spiritual pain, which stems from a deeper conflict of, like, worldview and values.
And the text makes a crucial distinction here, right? It states that for the vast majority of people, mental and spiritual pain completely surpass physical pain.
Yes, exactly. The psychological suffering we endure, like the chronic anxiety over that car loan, or the seething anger over a lockdown, the grief of being cheated on that dominates our existence far more than a physical ailment.
That's true for most of us, I think.
Right. And the core argument the text makes is about causality and our response to friction. Basically, if you respond to an external pain with an internal resistance, you create this infinite loop of suffering. The author argues that constantly pointing fingers at external factors ensures your pain will never, ever end because you can never perfectly control the external world.
So even if you manage to secure all 8 of those fundamental rights we just talked about.
Precisely. Even with total freedom, the environment will eventually frustrate you. I mean, the economy might crash, a pandemic might hit, people will just behave badly.
Because people are people.
Exactly. If your peace is contingent on the outside world behaving according to your personal preferences, you will always be a victim. That is why the text defines pain not as an environmental problem, but as a conscious illness. It is a sickness of the mind.
A conscious illness. Wow. And this definition actually leads to the most fascinating thought experiment in the entire text.
I love this part.
Yeah, the author asks the reader to imagine being placed directly into heaven, like a flawless, perfect paradise where nothing physically harms you,
Right.
ever.
Okay.
The text argues that if you bring your sick consciousness with you into heaven, you will still experience endless pain. You will find something to be anxious about, someone to resent, some expectation that just isn't being met.
Because your internal filter is fundamentally broken, you would look at paradise and just find a reason to be miserable.
Yes. But conversely, the author claims that if your consciousness is perfectly healthy, you wouldn't feel pain even if you were dropped straight into hell.
Which is an insane concept.
It is. And because of this, the text makes a staggering claim. It says,
Yeah.
we are, right now, currently living in heaven.
Earth is heaven.
Yeah, Earth is heaven. The only reason we feel that life on Earth is unbearable is because our consciousness is residing in hell.
It completely removes the environment from the equation of happiness, like 100%. The external world is rendered entirely neutral. Your consciousness is the projector, and it is casting either a movie of heaven or a movie of hell onto the blank screen of reality.
And to prove this point, the text doesn't shy away from extreme, deeply personal examples.
Well, it goes right for the gut.
It really does. The author brings up the scenario of discovering that your female partner has slept with other men. A profound, devastating betrayal of trust.
Right.
But the text claims that if you feel pain over this situation, the problem lies entirely within your own consciousness. Even in heaven, the text argues, a consciousness that feels pain over this betrayal would still find a way to create suffering for itself.
I can hear the resistance in your voice. And it's a really difficult concept to digest. It almost seems to demand that we abandon our basic human emotions.
I really do struggle with this.
Yeah.
Let's try to understand the mechanics of this using an analogy because
Yeah.
I think it helps. Let's think of human consciousness as a virtual reality headset.
Okay, a VR headset.
Yeah. If you are wearing a VR headset, all your senses are mediated through this device. If the hardware is damaged and the software is glitching, it literally does not matter if the computer is rendering the most beautiful digital paradise ever created.
Right, because you can't see it properly.
Exactly. When you look through the lenses, you're just going to see a distorted, flashing, nightmarish mess. Your headset is broken. So I understand the logic there. But I have to ask, and I think you listeners are probably asking this too, does the author expect us to just reprogram our software to, like, turn off the pain of a profound betrayal?
Mm-hmm.
Are we supposed to be indifferent robots?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look closely at the text, it isn't actually advocating for robotic numbness or even ignoring the reality of the betrayal. It is trying to identify the absolute root cause of what it calls erroneous consciousness.
Okay, so what's the root cause?
Well, it asks the question, why does the VR headset glitch in the first place? According to the text, the fundamental root of all this mental and spiritual agony is something it calls attachment to the self. Attachment to the self? What does that actually mean in the context of, like, someone stealing your property or betraying your trust?
The author defines this attachment very specifically. It is the persistent, unyielding belief that oneself is right while others are wrong.
Oh.
That is the glitch in your VR software. When your partner cheats, or the bank demands the loan payment, or the government locks you down, the deepest pain doesn't come directly from the physical event itself.
Right.
The agonizing, lingering pain comes from your internal insistence that reality should be matching your expectations, and that the other party is wrong for not conforming to your desires. Clinging to your own sense of rightness is what actually generates the friction.
So I am suffering because I am demanding that the universe operate according to my personal rules.
Exactly.
It's the gap between what reality is currently doing and what my ego demands reality should be doing. And the wider that gap, the deeper the suffering. That is the exact mechanism. You are trying to force the external world to obey your internal laws. And when it inevitably refuses, because it always will, you experience that friction as pain.
I can see the philosophical elegance of that. I really can. But let's be honest about human nature here. It is our default setting to want to be right.
Oh, 100%.
When someone breaks into your house and steals from you, it is a deeply human instinct to point at the thief and say, they are wrong and I am the victim. So what happens to people who simply refuse to accept this philosophy? The text provides a very stark diagnosis for those who cling to their grievances, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And this brings us to the danger of being what the text translates as obstinate and unenlightened.
Obstinate and unenlightened.
Yes, if you insist on attributing your pain entirely to external factors, like if you refuse to engage in self-reflection and instead constantly blame and condemn others, you earn this label.
It has such a finality to it.
Right.
And the text truly frames this lack of self-awareness as a terminal illness.
Mm.
The author literally calls this philosophy a medicine. If I'm reading the implications correctly, the author is saying that if you refuse to take the medicine, which means refusing to let go of your self-attachment, refusing to realize that your own consciousness is the engine of your pain, then there's simply no cure for you. You're choosing to stay sick.
That deduction is exactly where the text leads. And this raises an important question about the ultimate stakes of this philosophy. Because according to Zhu Feng, the consequence of refusing the medicine isn't just that you'll have, a miserable Tuesday or a stressful year.
It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. The text zooms out to a cosmic scale. It warns that if you remain obstinate, you will be trapped in endless cycles of reincarnation, continually living in pain, lifetime after lifetime.
Wow.
And crucially, you will be permanently barred from entering heaven.
Wait, why is that? What is the entry requirement for heaven according to this framework?
The text states quite plainly that heaven only accepts those who frequently feel joy and happiness.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it operates on the principle of resonance. If your consciousness is vibrating at the frequency of pain, resentment, and blame, you literally cannot exist in a realm defined by joy. You are incompatible with it.
That completely reframes the entire concept of the afterlife in this text. It's not a place you go as a reward for good behavior, like we're usually taught.
Right, no.
It's a state of being that you either match or you don't. Think about how this applies to your life right now. Yeah, as you listen to this.
Yeah, let's bring it back to the everyday.
Think about your commute this morning. Or think about a recent heated argument you had with a coworker, or maybe a family member. How quickly did your brain default to blaming the traffic or the weather or the other person's unreasonable attitude for ruining your mood?
Probably instantly.
Right. The text is challenging you to recognize that the environment didn't cause your pain. Your rigid insistence that the environment should have been different, that is the actual source of your suffering.
It is a total relocation of responsibility. It shifts the burden of happiness entirely onto your own internal state. And in doing so, it theoretically renders the external world completely powerless over your emotional well-being. You become untouchable.
Which brings us directly back to the massive, undeniable paradox at the heart of this deep dive. Let's synthesize the massive journey we've just taken.
Let's do it.
We started with Swifting's first text, which is an aggressive, uncompromising demand that we fiercely defend our fundamental human rights. We explore the naturalistic right to speak, to migrate, to learn, and to refuse. We are told we must reclaim these rights from those who steal them because without them, society is full of conflict and we are basically reduced to the status of animals.
Right, an incredibly proactive, externally focused, action-oriented philosophy. You have to build and defend the perimeter of human dignity.
But then we immediately collided with the second text, which demands we accept that all our internal suffering, whether it's the crushing stress of loan debts, the agony of restrictive lockdowns, or the heartbreak of profound betrayal, is entirely a product of our own sick consciousness. We are told that blaming the external world for our pain, even when that world is actively harming us, is a terminal illness of the soul.
It is the ultimate tension between the external struggle for justice and the internal struggle for perfect peace. And, it is very rare to see both absolute extremes argued so fervently by the exact same authors.
Sure, true. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked today and perhaps pushes the paradox to its absolute limit.
Yeah, consider this scenario. Imagine you actually achieve the perfect consciousness that the author describes in the second text. You take the medicine. You reach a state where you are completely unattached to the self. You abandon the need to be right. And as a result, you no longer feel pain. You could be dropped into the middle of hell, and your internal VR headset would still render a perfect, peaceful paradise.
Right.
Does achieving that state make you perfectly, ultimately free? Or does losing your capacity to feel pain also make you entirely indifferent to the violation of those 8 fundamental human rights we started with?
Oh, wow. That is a haunting question. If nothing hurts you anymore, like if you feel absolutely no pain or outrage when someone steals your property or silences your speech or locks you in your home, why would you ever bother to fight for your rights at all?
Exactly.
Does achieving supreme spiritual peace require us to become passive, unfeeling observers to injustice? If pain is just a glitch in the software, why would we ever fight to fix the broken hardware of society?
It really forces us to ask whether our pain, our anger at injustice, is actually a vital component of our humanity. Maybe the very thing that keeps us out of the author's heaven is the exact same thing that compels us to build a better world here on Earth.
That is something to truly chew on today. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating, paradoxical world of Shuifeng's writings. We encourage you to keep questioning the sources of your own happiness, your own pain, and whether you are focusing your energy on defending the perimeter or cleaning the mirror. Until next time.